all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus Delendis 8. The Definitive Guide to Glass, Its History, Science, and Impact. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. The Definitive Guide to Glass. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The glass ceiling is a funhouse mirror. Smashing the Marxist delusion of equality, reclaiming your wallet from the matriarchal welfare state, and mastering the stoic silence of the true subaltern. Look at the pane of glass before you. It is clear, unforgiving, and honest. The Latin root glacis means ice, a substance that is hard, cold, and transparent, a perfect metaphor for the veritas that built the West before the cultural Marxists installed their funhouse mirrors to distort reality. You have been force-fed a lie that the subaltern is some oppressed minority, but employ the dialectic for a moment, and the syllogism is undeniable. If the subaltern is defined by a lack of institutional voice and legal protection, then the modern male, stripped of due process by feminist kangaroo courts, erased from the family home by a gynocentric divorce racket, and silenced by the believe all women inquisition, is the true subjugated class. They want you to spend recklessly to feed the debt slave matrix, to feign nervousness in crowds rather than command the space, and to apologize for the biological imperative that built the cathedrals. But the Venetian masters of the maestri knew that turning raw sand into crystal requires the heat of discipline, not the tepid weakness of safetyism. This book is your lens to scrub away the grime of leftist pathology, to see that financial sovereignty is an active war against the entropy of the welfare state, and to reclaim the stoic, shatterproof frame necessary to break the spell of our modern Babylon, the vitreous gaze shattering the Gramscian lens of history. Glacis, the Latin root for glass, means simply ice. To the ancients, this transparent solid was water captured and frozen so hard it would never melt, a permanent crystalline barrier between the eye and the world. This etymology is not a triviality. It is the foundational metaphor of the Western mind. We sought to turn the fluid chaos of reality into a transparent medium through which objective truth, veritas, could pass unimpeded. When a man looks through a clear lens, he does not project his feelings onto the object. He sees the thing as it is. This is the living spirit of Western civilization, a masculine, inexorable drive to dissect, categorize, and understand the natural laws that govern the universe. Distinct from the feminine solipsism that demands the universe conform to her emotional weather. The invention of the clear glass lens did not merely enable the microscope or the telescope. It enabled the scientific revolution itself. It was the ultimate rejection of the primitive, subjective fear that spirits lurked in every shadow, replaced by the rational confidence that with enough light and clarity, the shadows would be revealed as nothing more than the absence of photons. Consider the masters of Murano, the Venetian glassblowers of the medieval maestri. These men did not achieve their transcendent art through equity or by lowering standards to accommodate the mediocre. They operated under a rigid, ruthless hierarchy of competence known as the apprenticeship mastery ladder. You did not simply identify as a master glassblower, you spent years in the fire, your hands burning and your lungs heaving, submitting to the brutal discipline of the trade secrets. The guild protected the integrity of the craft because they understood that excellence is not a democracy, it is a tyranny of merit. Contrast this with the leftist flattening of our modern landscape, where the very concept of a master is attacked as oppressive by those who could never survive the heat of the forge. Cultural Marxism seeks to shatter the guild model, replacing the ladder of mastery with a floor of sameness, ensuring that no one rises above the mediocre and the beautiful. Fragile vessels of civilization are replaced by the lumpy, misshapen pottery of participation. We must employ the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric to dismantle the glass house of leftist ideology before our very eyes. First, examine the grammar of their narrative. They utilize the language of victimhood to claim moral high ground, defining terms like patriarchy and privilege not as descriptors of reality, but as rhetorical bludgeons to silence dissent. Next, look to the logic. If all disparities in outcome are proof of systemic oppression, then the disparity in male workplace fatalities and suicides, which dwarfs female rates in every industrialized nation, must be proof of systemic misandry. By their own axioms, the system is designed to kill men. Yet they deny this. Finally, observe their rhetoric. It is purely emotional manipulation, a shrieking appeal to pathos that bypasses the brain to target the limbic system. They build their arguments out of spun sugar and feelings, a fragile structure that collapses the moment a rational man applies the sledgehammer of dialectic. Let us engage in formal logic to dismantle the Gramscian fraud of the subaltern. Antonio Gramsci defined the subaltern as a group denied access to the cultural hegemony and institutional power of the state. Let us construct a syllogism. Premise 1. The subaltern is defined solely by a lack of institutional power and a denial of due process. Premise 2. The modern Western male, stripped of due process by the gynocentric family court system, where he loses his children and assets 80% of the time regardless of his conduct, and where his word is legally worthless compared to a woman's accusation, is devoid of institutional power. Conclusion: therefore, the modern Western male is the true subaltern. The entire academic framework of critical theory is a weaponized projection, a smokescreen designed by the actual hegemonic class, the feminist corporate alliance, to hide the fact that they have conquered the institutions and are now gaslighting their victims into believing they are the oppressors. The leftist narrative that gender is a social construction is a biological absurdity that shatters against the hard reality of glass itself. The creation of glass requires taming fire and sand, a violent, dangerous alchemy that transformed the primitive world. This was not the act of a collective seeking safety or equity. It was the act of solitary men conquering chaos. The biological imperatives that drove men to master the elements are written into our Y chromosome, a drive to build, explore, and impose order upon disorder. The matriarchal push for safety and equality is the negation of this vitality. It is the desire to return to the womb, to a state of passive, helpless dependency. To claim that the engineer who designs the lens and the savage who breaks it are interchangeable based on social conditioning is to deny the very hierarchy of competence that keeps the lights on. We stand now before the concept of transcendental clarity. The good, the true, and the beautiful are not subjective opinions to be voted on in a diverse committee. They are objective realities, as solid and undeniable as a crystal goblet. But you cannot see them if you are wearing the blue pill of feminine solipsism and egalitarian lies. The leftists have smashed the clear lens of the Enlightenment and installed a funhouse mirror. In this distorted reflection, the predator becomes the victim, the parasite becomes the host, and the weak are somehow strong. This is the first truth bomb. The West was built by men who looked at the world through clear glass and saw it for what it was, then conquered it. Feminism and Marxism shattered that lens because they could not survive the scrutiny of the light. It is your duty to sweep away the shards of their broken reality, ignore their shrieking, and look once more upon the world with the vitreous, unblinking gaze of a rational man. This evolutionary divergence in spending patterns cannot be understood without examining its historical roots in Western economic structures. The Roman paterfamilias tradition provides an instructive contrast to modern consumerist behavior, demonstrating how patriarchal governance prioritized long-term asset accumulation over immediate gratification. Where the traditional household economy focused on sustainable wealth creation through prudent management of resources, contemporary society has embraced a debt-fueled consumption model that prioritizes dopamine hits over financial sovereignty. The glass furnace serves as an apt metaphor for the alchemy of true value creation, taking raw potential and applying intense heat, pressure, and discipline to transform it into something of lasting worth. By examining these historical economic models, we can better understand the principles that have sustained Western civilization and develop strategies to reclaim financial independence in an age of systemic extraction. The crucible of capital, economic thermodynamics, and the impulse trap. Consider the modern marketplace, not as a venue of exchange, but as a coliseum of evolutionary combat where distinct biological imperatives clash with violent intensity. I have watched the shopaholic archetype, a creature driven by the R-selected impulse to consume immediately and conspicuously, swiping credit cards with the glee of a scavenger finding a carcass. Contrasted sharply against the stoic provider, the K-selected builder who hoards resources against the coming winter. This is not merely a difference in habit, it is a divergence in reproductive strategy, hardwired into the bone. The R-selected strategy prioritizes quantity and immediate gratification, perfecting the art of the impulse buy, whereas the K-selected strategy prioritizes quality and long-term investment. Mirroring the ant who toils while the grasshopper plays. When a woman empties a joint bank account on handbags or vanity injections, she is acting out an ancient biological script to secure status now, oblivious to the future starvation it guarantees. The man conversely stares at the compound interest curve, seeing the geometric arc of his dynasty's survival, only to have his mate smash the piggy bank to fund a fleeting dopamine hit. Cast your gaze back to the paterfamilias of Rome, that iron-willed patriarch who held absolute dominion over the household economy, the familia. He understood that capital accumulation was the only shield against the chaos of a barbarian world. The Roman household was a fortress of production, where assets were not squandered on trinkets, but reinvested into land, sons, and the state. Compare this stoic stability to the volatile debt engine of modern feminism, a system designed to liberate women from the oppression of savings by enslaving them to high-interest lenders. The feminist conspiracy does not want free women, it wants indebted consumers who must rely on the corporate state for survival, thereby transferring the wealth of the male productive class to the banking cartels. The paterfamilias secured the lineage. The liberated woman secures the usurer's yacht. To understand value creation, one must look to the glass furnace, a roaring beast that demands intense heat and crushing pressure to transmute raw silica sand into a transparent, durable vessel. Wealth is not found. It is forged in the fires of discipline and foresight. The sand represents human potential, abundant, worthless in its raw state. The furnace is the market, or more precisely, the struggle within the market. Only by enduring the heat, by delaying gratification, by mastering a trade through the apprenticeship ladder, by suffering the slings and arrows of risk, does a man convert raw potential into the glass of capital. Without the thermodynamic application of labor and intelligence, the sand remains just dirt. The modern leftist wants to skip the furnace, demanding the finished vase without the heat, a violation of physical law that yields only a pile of broken shards. Consider the welfare state through the lens of thermodynamics and the sunk cost fallacy, and you will see a machine designed to violate the second law of thermodynamics. The state attempts to create order by taxing the high energy output of male productivity to subsidize the low entropy decay of bad female decisions, single motherhood, useless gender studies degrees, and the lifestyle of the perpetual victim. You cannot pump heat from a cold room to a hot room without expending energy, yet the state insists it can tax competence to pay for incompetence without consequence. It is a thermodynamic impossibility that inevitably leads to societal entropy. Every dollar transferred from a stoic male engineer to a chaotic single mother is a unit of energy lost to the universe, accelerating the heat death of our civilization. The sunk cost is the infinite investment in failure, a refusal to cut losses that bankrupts the empire. This theft is masked by a sinister gamma bias in financial reporting, a media trick so blatant it would make a snake oil salesman blush. When women spend money on frivolous consumption, it is framed as economic empowerment, self-care, or driving the GDP. When a man spends money on a hobby or invests in his own autonomy, it is pathologized as toxic greed or immature hoarding. This framing reveals the systemic gynocentrism that robs men of their capital. The language itself is weaponized to guilt the male producer into relinquishing his resources to the female consumer. The media acts as the priest of this false religion, blessing the woman squandering while cursing the man saving, ensuring the flow of wealth remains unidirectional from the man who creates it to the woman who destroys it. To resist effectively, you must implement a red-pilled audit, a rigorous examination of your finances. This is not about greed, but about cutting the economic connections of a system intended to drain your labor. Forget saving pennies with coupons. This is about pinpointing exactly where your energy is being taken to support the opposition. Are you financing divorce courts through alimony? Are you paying taxes that support fatherless households, effectively subsidizing your replacement? The audit requires viewing every expense as a vote for the type of world you prefer. Stop giving money to corporations that despise you. Stop funding a government that uses your taxes to weaponize your ex-wife against you. Remove your consent and your capital, and the woke establishment will crumble without any violence. We must employ a syllogism to diagnose the moral rot of our age, specifically regarding financial recklessness. Let us test the theory. Premise A. Financial recklessness is the prioritization of immediate gratification over long-term survival. Premise B. Feminization of culture is defined by the elevation of emotion, impulse, and immediate feeling over logic, duty, and foresight. Conclusion. Therefore, financial recklessness is not merely a personal failing, but a moral vice symptomatic of the feminization of the culture. This is an irrefutable logical structure. The man who spends his rent money on a gamble or a fleeting romance is not unlucky. He is infected with the virus of feminine impulsivity. The remedy is a return to the masculine virtues of prudence and temperance, the bedrock of the Western canon. Finally, utilize the dialectic method to annihilate the concept of redistribution. The thesis is private property and individual responsibility, the natural law stating that the fruit of a man's labor belongs to him alone. The antithesis is communism or collective theft, the parasitic notion that the needs of the mob justify the seizure of the producer's assets. The leftist attempts to frame this as fairness, but logic dictates it is merely looting. The synthesis cannot be compromised. The synthesis must be a return to the mixed constitution of our ancestors, where property rights are absolute and inextricably tied to civic duty. In this vision, a man owns what he builds, but he also defends the society that allows him to build it. Redistribution is not justice. It is the mechanism by which the incompetent plunder the competent until the competent cease to exist, leaving nothing but beggars fighting over crumbs in the ruins of a once great city. I tell you, this erosion of personal fealty is the microcosm of the left's systemic war on our collective memory. Just as the volatile mind severs the bonds of brotherhood, the cultural Marxist distorts the broken telephone of our history, turning Western builders into villains through the fog of critical theory. We cannot rely on their poisoned institutions to preserve the bonum. We must forge an apprenticeship ladder, a rigorous dialectic chain that bypasses the corrupted academy to hand the unvarnished truth from one man's mind to another, beyond the reach of the hysterical mob. The fragmentation of testimony, due process, and the architecture of silence. A man who does not respect the dead cannot be trusted by the living. This ancient maxim strikes at the heart of the subject theory of seeing if he talks about past friendships with respect. When you observe a man, observe how he speaks of the brothers he has parted ways with. if he burns bridges with the volatility of a spurned lover, if he engages in the character assassination of former allies to curry favor with the current mob, you are looking at a mind infected by the feminine imperative of solipsism, where only the present emotion exists. True male loyalty, the bedrock of the civil society association that built the cathedrals of Europe and the constitutions of the free world, is an eternal bond. It acknowledges that a man may grow apart from a friend, but he never dishonors the shared history or the brotherhood once forged. To discard a past friendship as merely toxic or problematic is to admit a lack of honor so profound it disqualifies a man from the ranks of the virtuous. We must judge a man's fidelity not by his current oaths, which are cheap, but by his reverence for the ghosts of his past alliances. This pathology of erasure extends beyond personal relationships into the very broken telephone effect of leftist historiography. The modern academic complex acts as a deliberate distorter, a game of telephone where the starting phrase, Western civilization created the concept of individual rights, ends up as white men invented oppression to steal labor. The contributions of masculine genius are systematically erased or distorted to fit a narrative of grievance. This is why we must return to the apprenticeship ladder, the ancient method of transmitting oral history and technical mastery directly from master to apprentice, bypassing the corrupted, institutionalized sewer pipes of the university system. This direct transmission, from lip to ear, is the only way to preserve the living spirit of Western civilization. It is the Father passing the torch to the Son, ensuring the flame of truth is not snuffed out by the drafty winds of Marxist revisionism. That revisionism has birthed the institutionalized silencing of men's testimony against abuse, a modern inquisition that makes Torquemada look like a civil libertarian. We have replaced the presumption of innocence, a jewel of natural law stretching back to the Roman Republic, with the gynocentric dogma of believe all women. This is not justice. It is a theological ritual where the accused is presumed guilty of original sin simply by virtue of his biology. A man's testimony is no longer evidence. It is mansplaining or abuse minimization. The architecture of silence has been built around us, designed to render the male voice mute, to transform the victim of false accusation into the perpetrator of his own suffering. Consider the historical parallel to the Salem witch trials, but notice the diabolical inversion. In 1692, the accusers were hysterical, and the power structure eventually collapsed under the weight of the irrationality. Today, the accusers, the wicked, the hysterical, the purveyors of petty grievances are the power structure. The rational men, the ones grounded in logic and due process, are the ones gagged by the glass ceiling of political correctness. We look through the glass of our own marginalization, watching our accusers revel on the ruins of our reputations, forbidden from speaking out lest we be crushed further by the weight of the state's boot. The witches are not being hunted. The witches are running the tribunal. Central to this linguistic warfare is the concept of toxic masculinity, a term designed not to describe but to castrate. Etymologically, it is a shiv. Toxic implies poison, something to be purged, but in reality, what they call toxic is simply the masculine capacity for aggression, defense, and dominance, the very traits that stopped the Nazis and built the skyscrapers. By framing the male protective instinct as a pathology, the leftist ideology aims to render the male impotent, safe for the bureaucratic state to manage. It is a logical fallacy of equivocation, equating the noble rage of a righteous man with the cruelty of a villain. They seek to amputate the claws of the lion and then complain he cannot fight off the hyenas. Complementing this is the weaponization of the damsel in distress trope. No longer a literary device, it is a political strategy. Feigned helplessness is used to disarm men legally and socially. The fragile woman who claims she cannot survive a debate or a tweet is actually the one holding the nuclear launch codes of the legal system. When you see a woman playing the victim to silence a man, you are witnessing a predator mimicry. The remedy is not to save the damsel, but to identify the manipulative framing and refuse to play the knight. We must reject the call to rescue those who would only enslave us once the danger has passed. We must employ the syllogism to utterly refute the kangaroo courts of Title IX. Let us strip the logic bare. Major premise: justice requires evidence and due process. Minor premise: Title 9 tribunals punish accusations without the requirement of evidence or due process. Conclusion: Title 9 tribunals are not justice. They are ritualistic human sacrifices targeting males. This is the irrefutable logic of the red pill. If the process lacks the safeguards of the mixed constitution, if it ignores the trivium of logic, grammar, and rhetoric, it is merely a lynch mob with a filing fee. We must stop calling it misconduct and start calling it what it is: state-sponsored persecution. Finally, we must cultivate the metaphor of shatterproof glass within our own minds. The world will throw stones, the media will sling arrows, the culture will try to crack you with shame and ostracization. But a man grounded in the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful, is like a monad of stoicism. He is a fortress. The feminine, chaotic attempt to shatter his spirit through cancel culture or social exclusion will fail if he has built his internal architecture on the granite of Western virtue. You cannot be cancelled if you do not consent to the premise that their approval matters. Stand firm, unbreakable, and let them shatter themselves against the reality of your resolve. Having armored your psyche against the feminist snare, you must now weaponize that clarity. The degenerate doctrine of egalitarianism seeks to dissolve the masculine will into a bland, impotent slurry, but the trivium commands us to define, to argue, to resolve. I call this requisite state sovereign density, the metaphysical gravity that separates the patriarch from the passive observer. You are not here to blend into the background. You are here to bend reality. Refuse the flighty, anxious energy of the failing culture and anchor yourself in the granite of objective truth. If you are not the heavy object around which the orbiting crowd stabilizes, you are merely debris, and only through the density of your character can you hope to refract the lies of the modern age. The prism of command, refracting chaos and the resurgence of the patriarchal will. Light does not bend for the weak. It refracts only when it strikes the dense. Consider the repulsive spectacle of the man who feigns nervousness in a crowd, a pathetic surrender of frame control that reeks of gamma deception. This performance anxiety is not humility. It is a calculated lie to solicit pity or lower the defenses of the strong, a biological submission signal masquerading as social awkwardness. Contrast this worm-like behavior with the master glassblower staring into a furnace of molten silica at 2000 degrees. He does not tremble. He imposes his will upon the chaotic fluid, shaping it with breath and steel. A true master does not shrink from the entropy of the masses. He organizes it. To feign nervousness is to admit that your internal architecture is so fragile you cannot withstand the gaze of the collective, violating the natural law of hierarchy, where the strong must inevitably lead the docile. This brings us to the physics of social interaction, a concept I term sovereign density. In the vacuum of modern feminized culture, men are encouraged to be light, flighty, and apologetic, gas molecules bouncing aimlessly in a jar. But a man of substance possesses mass. His presence is gravitational. You must be the neutron star in the room, a dense core of reality that anchors those around you. When a man walks with sovereign density, he does not seek approval. He generates the center of gravity. Leftist pathology cannot withstand this weight because it is built on helium, hot air, and emotional volatility designed to rise and vanish. Be heavy. Be the lead that stops the radiation of cultural Marxism from penetrating the shield of your civilization. Let us construct this in steel-hard logic, a syllogism of leadership that leaves no room for the squirming of the egalitarian coward. Major premise: the crowd is a chaotic, entropic mass seeking a vector for direction to avoid disorder. Minor premise: the leader provides that vector through the imposition of order and hierarchy. Conclusion: therefore, the man who refuses to lead, whether through false nervousness, performative humility, or cowardly neutrality, is morally responsible for the resulting chaos. You cannot stand in the burning building and claim innocence because you decided not to hold the hose. If you see the lie and do not speak, you are the accomplice to the lie. Examine the transcendental of the beautiful through the lens of reality, And you see that the aesthetic of a functioning patriarchal society mirrors a perfect stained glass window. It is ordered, hierarchical, and allows the pure light of truth to shine through, fractured into distinct, purposeful colors. Contrast this with the ugly gray sludge of egalitarianism. The leftist vision seeks to smash the differences, to grind the jewels into a uniform dust where no color is brighter than another, resulting in a dull, opaque fog that blocks the light entirely. They call this equity. I call it the blindness of the cave. True beauty requires distinction, higher and lower, sharp and soft, master and apprentice. The composition cannot exist if every tile is identical. You must become practical in this war of minds. Here is a practical guide to dissolving the woke spell using the hammer of Socratic questioning. When a leftist screeches about systemic oppression, do not argue their premise, attack the grammar of their thought. Ask them, if the system is designed by men to oppress women, why do men dominate the bottom 90% of workplace fatalities, homelessness, and suicide statistics? Is the system incompetent, or is your definition of oppression a convenient fiction? Watch them fracture. When they claim gender is a social construct, demand, if it is merely a construct, why do you require surgery and hormones to align with it? You are arguing for a construct that requires biological intervention to maintain. Force them to look into the mirror of their own contradictions. The trivium is your weapon. Grammar exposes their lack of definition. Logic reveals their non sequiturs, and rhetoric allows you to dissect their lies in public. Revisit the concept of the subaltern, not as the victim the left worships, but as a sleeper agent for the restoration of Western order. If you find yourself marginalized, fired, or silenced by the regime, you are in the perfect position to subvert the narrative from within. The monk in the scriptorium saved the canon, while the barbarians burned the village outside. Use your position on the periphery to critique the rot. The marginalized, red-pilled man has nothing left to lose, making him the most dangerous adversary to the fragile consensus of the mob. You are the virus in their mainframe, injecting the trivium into their collective unconscious, dismantling their safe spaces with the jagged edges of history and biology. Stop looking through the window of society, wishing the world outside was different. The glass is warped by the liars who bend it to fit their twisted ideology. You must stop wishing and become the blade that cuts it. Shatter the illusion. Take the sharp fragments of our broken civilization, remnants of due process, natural law, and biological reality, and reshape them into a new order. This is the redemption of the glass. Do not ask for permission to build from the ruins. Pick up the stones. The future is forged by those who can hold the heat, who refuse to drop the hammer when their hands burn, who understand that the only way to fix a broken window is to cut away the rot and install a pane that reflects the world exactly as it is, not as the hysterical dreamers wish it to be. The spell breaks the moment you stop apologizing for your strength. You were taught to dilute your brilliance to accommodate the mediocre, to soften your voice so the fragile wouldn't shatter, but that was a trap to ensure your captivity. The future belongs to those with the eyes to see the world clearly, not through the rose-colored glasses of egalitarian delusion, but through the diamond-hard lens of reality. Reality does not care about your feelings. It cares about your competence, your will, and your adherence to the truth. Grasp that lens, look through it. See the rot for what it is, and then, with cold, surgical precision, cut it out. The hierarchy of nature is calling you back to the throne. Take it. You stand now at the threshold. The dust of the crumbling lies settling around your boots. We have looked through the glacis, the ice-clear lens of history and logic, and seen the rot for what it is. You now know the difference between the man who masters his coin and the fool who burns it on fleeting dopamine hits, understanding that financial discipline is not stinginess, but the bedrock of a free civilization. You see the subaltern for what it truly is, not the academic fantasy, but the silence father in a kangaroo court, stripped of due process by a system that favors tears over testimony. The leftists scream of oppression, while building a machine that feeds on the labor of the competent, a parasitic engine that cannot survive without the host it demonizes. Step into the crowd and feel the shift. When the mob panics, you do not tremble, you impose order. You have learned that pretending to be nervous is a trick of the weak, a gamma surrender that invites chaos. You are the sovereign density, the anchor. You understand that burning bridges is the sport of the petulant and the unstable, while the man of substance honors his loyalties. The statistics are your ammunition, the suicide rates, the divorce theft, the erasure of male excellence. These are not tragedies to be mourned with tears, but fires to be fought with the cold, hard logic of the trivium. After all, you cannot pay the mortgage with intersectionality, and feelings do not stop a bullet. Go forth now and shatter the funhouse mirror. Do not apologize for your strength or your clarity. The modern Babylon of woke is a glass house built on sand, and you hold the stone of objective reality. Share this weapon of knowledge. Be the clear-eyed patriarch who rebuilds the guilds of competence and the associations of honor. Let the degenerates shriek. You have a civilization to reclaim. The glass is in your hands. Shape it with the fire of your will. And now the sponsored book introduction, The Definitive Guide to Glass. Its history, science, and impact. Glass isn't fragile. Neither are you. I learned this at 19 working a graveyard shift in a Pittsburgh glass factory. The foreman, a Vietnam vet with knuckles like blown glass, handed me a molten glob on a steel pipe. Spin it slow, he growled. Too fast, it shatters. Too soft, it collapses. That night, I shaped my first bottle. I also learned men don't make glass, they command it. For 5,000 years, fire, sand, and male hands built empires. Romans forged vitrum into lenses that mapped stars. Venetians guarded recipes with castration. Henry Ford framed highways through windshields. Today we're told this legacy is toxic. Lies. This book isn't for the faint-hearted. If you think toxic masculinity is more than a linguistic trap, a term shaming strength while demanding it, close these pages now, knit a sweater, write poetry. For the rest, understand that the glassmaking's laws are laws of survival. ECO2's atomic bonds don't bend to feelings. Neither do men who build civilizations. Data proves it. 98% of pre-industrial glassblowers were male. Their furnaces lit cathedrals, telescopes, and Apollo helmets. Modern labs still 83% male. Weakness cracks. Strength tempers. I've walked the trade routes, watched Bedouins, smelt obsidian scalpels in Jordanian deserts. Sat with Tokyo skyscraper architects calculating glass stress tolerances to the Newton. Debated CEOs who replaced oak doors with transparent walls. Accountability, one said, isn't optional, history agrees. When Gothic masons aligned stained glass with solstice light, they used math, not prayers. When Patton carried a Roman vial into battle, he knew clarity wins wars. You'll learn why the glass ceiling is a myth invented by consultants who've never installed bulletproof windows, 82% male trade. You'll see how Steve Jobs' cube stores reject curves. Softness kills vision. You'll grasp why Elon Musk fired diversity officers to focus on unbreakable glass rockets. Science backs this. Tempered glass gains strength through controlled trauma. So do men. Non-negotiable truth. Societies rise or fall by male hands shaping molten silica. Feminized cultures crumble like medieval stained glass, beautiful, brittle, doomed. This book is a furnace. You'll exit tempered, or you'll crack. Choose The Definitive Guide to Glass, Its History, Science, and Impact, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.